Studying Matthew 24 tonight and again next week, while we'll be finishing it up. This is going to be a more difficult study than what we've had as we've gone through because it really is I suppose, the most misunderstood and difficult chapter in all of the New Testament. Now, the reason for that is because this chapter is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And I'm going to go through it verse by verse by verse and show you why I'm saying that. But we'll not try to jump ahead. I'm going to set the stage for tonight, and then we'll take a look at how it's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Now you say, well, what is so odd about that? We've studied our Old Testament, and we studied in the last week in Matthew 23 that Jesus said Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. All history knows it was destroyed. Everybody talks about it being destroyed in 70 A.D. There's no question about it. So what is so unusual about that? Well, the unusual thing about it is, if you'll take your New Testament and look in chapter 24 and look in verse 3. Now, I'm going to pick out 3 or 4 verses, and I'm just going to do this to kind of boggle your mind and throw you in a spin, okay? So as we look at this, why it says here, it gets down, he says, "Tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world." Now that sounds like he's talking about his second coming, doesn't it? See? Down at the end of the world. Anybody that reads it would know, yeah, that sounds like that's what it's talking about. And yet a minute ago, I said it's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Well, flip on over to, I'll just pick out another one right here, in verse 27. "For as the lightning cometh forth from the east and is seen even unto the west, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man." Well, that sure sounds like that's the second coming of Christ in there. Really looks like it. 31. "And he shall send forth his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of the heaven to the other." Surely that's talking about the second coming of Christ, but it's not. And on we could go, picking out some verses in there that really sound that way. So now, I throw that out to you to let you know I'm well aware of the fact that when we pick up the Bible and we start reading it and we look at these verses out of their context, why we would jump to that conclusion. There are many major religions that have the religion of premillennialism that is based on this, that it's talking about when Jesus comes again, his second coming. So, I want you to be with me. I'm going to try to make it as simple as I can. I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you, historical quotes and passages of Scripture and so forth in these next 2 weeks. I'll try to go as rapidly as I can so we won't get bored. But if I go too rapidly, why, hold up your hand and say, "Stop, I didn't understand that." And we will have really a verse-by-verse study then. And what I want to tell you as we start with, that I really believe that I can show you from the Bible itself that this all is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. So let's take off. Now, last week we studied chapter 23. And in chapter 23 we find that it says in Matthew, "Behold, your house is left to you desolate," as he's talking to the Jewish people. Then, in Luke 19, talking about the same thing, why he says, "And they shall dash thee to the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knowest not the time of thy visitation." Now this one stone upon another, we'll see, Matthew's going to be talking about. And so, I'm not going to go back and review what we've already studied, other than we've already studied and we've seen that throughout the Old Testament, God talked about punishing Israel and Judah. He punished them severely, and finally he says that he's going to bring them to an end. Just like every other nation, when they rebel against him and there's no need for them to be saved, then he says, "I'm going to do this." So, back over there on the left-hand side, "Behold, your house is left unto you desolate." So this is going to be the time that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. Now when Jerusalem is destroyed, the Jewish nation will be destroyed, and it will never rise again then in there, and we'll see why this is happening. So now then, let's look at our setting for the study here in Matthew chapter 24. We find that Matthew says, And Jesus went out from the temple and was going on his way, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And he answered and said unto them, See ye all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Mark reads the same way. Here it is, Teacher, behold what manner of stones and what manner of buildings. Luke, the same way. It said, they spake to him how it was adorned with goodly stones and offerings, and he said. Now, here it is, the temple in Jerusalem was such an awesome building that as they were leaving, his disciples turned around and called his attention to it. Now, they had seen it hundreds of times, but they called his attention to it. I guess it would be kind of like our Space Needle here, that if you and I were driving by, and it might be, I'd say, isn't that an awesome structure? See? And you'd say, well, Lowell, I thought you had known that for all these many years. Well, it's such an unusual, awesome structure that, yeah, just look at that thing. How did they do that? We do that to awesome buildings. Now, Jesus made that other statement and said then that there's coming a time when not one stone will be left upon another. Now, I want us to note these two things as we start with. Now, the background for the comment of Jesus and the questions of his disciples. So it came out and it said, his disciples to show him the buildings of the temple. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures of the temple. These, of course, are artist's view as they take, because the temple has been destroyed. The temple was destroyed, stone by stone, not one stone left upon another. The ground was plowed up. It was just as bald and bare as it could possibly be. And so the temple was totally destroyed. But as you read about it, there's the artist's conception of what it would be like as you're going into that temple. As you look at it from another viewpoint, it would be like that. From another viewpoint, it's like this. In Jerusalem, they have built a model city. And this is the model city of showing the great structure around there with the temple. That tall building in the middle would be the holy place and the most holy place. There it is, the holy place and the most holy place. As you look at it, it's just awesome. Josephus said that if a man has not seen the temple when the morning sun hits it and it's glowing with all of the white marble, it was made out of white marble and then decorated with gold, why, he's never seen beauty. So it must have been a very, very awesome structure. And so the artists are trying to show us here what these things were like in there. There would be an overhead view that we've used before, that you see it as it's setting down, all that courtyard that is around about it. There's a view that shows the kind of the size of the people and so forth of what it would be like. So you can see for yourself that, yeah, it's an awesome view. Great tall columns. You read in the book of Acts about Solomon's porch. There you are, walking in it and around it, and it's held up there by all of those great, great, gigantic columns. Just another viewpoint as we go there. One of the walkways that you walk down that's in there. So these are just to kind of give you an idea. That temple was great. Since we've never seen it, since it's not part of our life, a lot of times we don't really realize how awesome and how great it was. Herod had spent 46 years in building it, had tens of thousands of people working on it. It was the most awesome structure that you could think of that is in there. But now, let's get back to the shocking comments of Jesus. When they showed him this, instead of him saying, "Oh, isn't that awesome? Isn't that great?" He said, "See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." Now, what a statement is made. What could cause that? Even an earthquake couldn't cause that. What would cause it where not one stone will be left upon another? All right, now here are some of the stones in the building. So kind of look at it. You say, what, you mean those great big blocks? Yeah, those great big blocks. It was made out of great big blocks. And this right here is part of the underground foundation that they've dug out so you can walk along it and you can see some of those stones that were under the ground that was left there when all the stones had disappeared. So now, look at this. Here is one stone, 44 feet long, 15 feet high, and 11 feet wide. One stone cut out of a hill and moved down there. They have no idea how it got down, but that's how big the thing is. There it is, one stone weighing 600 tons. Now, to give you an idea that we hear about these big rocks and megaliths at Stonehenge, the biggest one weighs 40 tons. And then in the Great Pyramid there, they weigh 15 tons. This one weighed 600 tons. They cut it out of a mountain somewhere else. They brought it down, set it in there, and it fits. And then one stone after another. That's the largest one, by the way, that they found. But one stone after another. Some of them were only, instead of 44 feet, only 40 feet. I mean, they were large, huge stones. Nobody has any idea how they got them down there, how they got them lifted up, how they got them put on there. They're talking about even with heavy equipment today, well, they would have no idea of how to do such a thing as this. But what I want to impress you with is that these stones were big. And history says that the average stone, I think in there, say went up, was probably about 20 feet long, be about half this size, and 10 feet high and 10 feet wide, something like this. So it would be about half this size, be a little baby, I guess, of 300 tons. There. Now, what happens to knock all these stones off of there? Well, I want you to see this for a particular reason. As you can see, as you walk out of the temple and you come down that walkway there, the day that 70 AD, that temple collapsed, I'm getting ready to show you a picture of what it's like right underneath that. So I want you to look at it, how pretty it was. But when the Romans got through with it, there's what it looked like. And if you see that bare spot that is in there, they've left it. It's an archaeological find. They've left it. That's where that walkway hit the ground, knocked that cement walkway down, put a curvature in the earth, and that's what it looks like. That's how big it was. There's a pile of stones down there, and there's a hole that's right there. There's some stones that actually were thrown off in 70 AD. And so they've got them marked off and protected, but you're looking at actual stones that were thrown away in fulfillment of this. So now, let's look at a brief history of the destruction of Jerusalem before we start our text. Everybody knows that Jesus came and died. 50 days later, the day of Pentecost came. That's when the Holy Spirit came down and His kingdom came into existence. Now, back before Jesus died, right before He died, a day or two, in Matthew 24, Jesus said, Jerusalem will be destroyed. That's what we're going to read about. Now, Jerusalem here is going to be destroyed, but I want to skip over now. Now, Jesus died in 33 AD. 33 years later, in 66 AD, some unusual things began happening in the land of Palestine. And we need to know a few of these things. I'm not going to bore you with a whole lot of details, but I'll try to give you some interesting details. In 66 AD, the Roman government had it up to here with the Jewish nation. The Jews had been rebelling against Rome. And Rome had been telling them, you can have your own laws, you can do what you want to do if you obey us. But the Jews were rebelling against them. So it was just one fight after another with the Roman rulers and the Roman army and the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. Back and forth they were fighting. Finally, Rome gave the orders to a man who was a general by the name of Vespasian. Now, Vespasian was a general, and he said, go bring that nation to its knees. So he went over, and he started up in the land of Galilee that we've studied about up there. So he went up there because that's where the mean fighters were. They needed to be brought under control. So he goes up there, and he starts fighting them. Now, at this time, there was a Jewish general by the name of Josephus. Now, Josephus is going to become a very important person, so try to remember that name. He was a Jewish general. But now, as you read about him, and you read his books, he wrote 2 big books, and you read the books, he was a politician par excellence. When anything good went right, he, just like me, he took the credit. But when something goes wrong, it's Steve's fault. I think you probably all noticed that. And so that's the way that Josephus was. He always took advantage and made sure that he always came out on top. So he's up there fighting, and evidently he wasn't doing a very good job, and the Sanhedrin down at Jerusalem got sick and tired of him, and so word came up that they were going to pull him down and strip him of his title and take his generalship away from him. Well, he's the kind of guy, he said, okay. So he put on his best uniform, he went down to Jerusalem, he marched in to that Sanhedrin, went in there angry. What is this that I hear? I demand that you give me more troops. I demand, and he went in and started demanding, how can a man fight the way that you fight? And they ended up giving it to him. And so he went away with more power than what he had. So he went back up there, and he's fighting them. Now, in 66 A.D., an interesting thing happened over in Caesarea. But what had happened was this. The Romans had gone down to Jerusalem, and of course they're a powerful army, and they had gone into the temple, and they were putting up their eagles, their insignias there, and the eagle was their mascot the same way as it is here in the United States, and they were putting this up. Now, an eagle to the Jews was something far different than it is to us. The eagles represented Caesar and Rome. Caesar was claiming to be a god, and so here it is in the temple, we're putting up the insignia of another god other than Jehovah. So the Jews rebelled, and they drove them out, and they went to Herod, and they said, we demand that you take them down. Now, Herod was up to Caesarea. And so about 500 Jews went up to Caesarea, and they demanded this. Now, this is the second time it happened. And so there was a big, what's called a hippodrome. It's where they race their horses and chariots. And it's about the size of a great big football field. And there were 500 Jews that went in and said, we demand that you do it, and we're not leaving till you do. And so Herod decided what he would do. So he takes his seat up there, calls them all in, come in, tell me your grievance. They came in, made their demands, and he had already had his army around to tell the soldiers, when I give the signal, you soldiers come and surround them, and I will give you the orders then to kill them. And so he did that. There's the 500. They made the demands, and Herod said, here's my answer, and called the soldiers in. The soldiers came in. They surrounded all these 500, and Herod said, you either shut up and go home, or we're going to have your head beheaded right now. All 500 of those people bowed down and stuck their neck out for the sword, and they stayed there. Now, Herod has a problem. Herod knows that if he kills 500 of those people, he's not going to be teaching the Jews anything. He's just going to be making them madder. And he knows what will happen to Caesar. Caesar is going to come over and remove him, so he's caught between that rock and a hard place. And finally, he gives in. He said, okay, we'll remove it. Now, Rome is really mad because the Jews now has called his bluff, and they're really getting mad. Now, it's at this time that Vespasian has a son who's also a general, and his name is Titus. And Titus and Vespasian are both over in Galilee conquering the Jews. And they go in, and they conquer this city where Josephus is pinned up, and they kill all the people in the city. But Josephus and about 30 other people somehow got down in a dungeon and hid and let the other people all get killed. But they couldn't get to them. They were in a place where they couldn't get to them. So they got down there, and then Josephus, the other people said, let's die. We will go out and we will die with the people. And Josephus is saying, no, let's go out and let's give up and act like, and then we'll be able to do more alive than we are dead. And so, but none of the rest of them would do it. They said, no, we're dying with the troops. Josephus finally said, okay, I agree. We will die with the troops. But I tell you what, let's do. Let's do this in a sensible way. So he said, let's draw numbers. And number 1 will kill number 2. Number 2, how'll it be? You figure it out. Number 1 kills number 2, number 2 kills number 3, and I guess he's already dead or something. I forget now how it worked out there. But you get the point. That as you get this, each one in succession kills that other person. Now, it just so happens that Josephus drew the last number. And the last guy is supposed to fall on his sword. Well, all historians say, according to Josephus's conniving ways, he had this trick up his sleeve somehow, and he, by sleight of hand, he got that last number. So, everybody did it. Killed everybody in the dungeon except Josephus. So Josephus then climbs out, runs out, and out there is Vespasian. And he runs out to him and he falls down and he says, "Oh, Vespasian." And then he starts giving him honor and he says, "I have received a vision. And my vision is that you are a great man and you will soon be elevated to the emperorship." Well, Romans were very superstitious. And when they got up of a morning, they would go out and literally watch which way the birds were flying to see whether they should fight in a battle or not. See? And they had their, what we call witch doctors. And the doctors would be out there. These men, these magical readers, they would go out. And if the birds were sitting in a tree, it meant one thing. If they were flying, it meant another thing. If they're flying south, it meant yes. Flying no, it meant no, north. And then, if there were no birds, and you couldn't find anything, and it wasn't lightning, everything had something, but if it was just a real dull morning, they always had the sacred rooster. And they always carried a flock of roosters with them. So he would go out and kill a rooster, open it up, and read its gizzard and liver and see what it says. Then he'd come up and say, "The gods say you should go to battle." And it was always in favor of the Caesars. Let's do this. So here it is. This guy runs out and he says, "You will be elevated." So Vespasian liked that. So he said, "Save his life. Take him prisoner." So he took him in, and Josephus put on his great political act, and he became a friend of Titus. And finally, Vespasian then told Titus, "Don't kill him, take him along with you." And so Josephus agreed he would go along and he would write the history of these generals. Now, at this time, not long after, the Nero got killed, and so the way that you determine who the next emperor will be in Rome was whoever gets there first and gets the army together and can fight the other people off. There are countries today that's kind of like that. And so Vespasian gets word from his cohorts, get to Rome as fast as you can because he's dead, and other people are trying to get the throne, and you get up there, and your army is going to follow you. And so Vespasian took off for Rome and said, "Titus, go conquer Jerusalem." So now, this was about 68 AD then when that happened. So Titus heads down now to conquer Jerusalem. He heads down, and to make the long story short, 2 years later, he totally conquered Jerusalem. He went down and he put his army around there and built a fence all the way around it. It was about, I think they said, 7 miles long there to build this fence to keep the Jews from escaping. Now they're all locked up in there, and there's evidently millions of them in that little city there. And I'll show you why I say that later on. So they're in there, and their food supply obviously is going to run out. And so we're just going to starve them out. Well, this thing went on, and the people in Jerusalem had 2 leaders, and both of them were horrible men. Both of them were horrible men. But they were leaders of the army, and they hated each other. And they were trying to, each man, take control of the city of Jerusalem. So food supply ran out, and the grain would run out, and all of these men would steal all the grain for themselves and hoard it up. And it finally got so bad that people were dying, and they'd throw their bodies over the wall, and sometimes Jews would jump over the wall and try to escape, and sometimes they'd get caught. And one time one of them got caught, and he had swallowed some gold. And he got caught, and I don't know why they cut him open, but they did cut him open and found that gold that's in there. I think he burst open, and they found the gold in there. And then they said, why, those Jews, everybody that's escaping is probably swallowing gold. So from there on, any Jew that they caught, they just opened him up to see whether there's any gold in there. Now, up here, everybody is starving. So we're in a starvation situation now. It was so bad that it tells about how people were just going around and stealing, and these men stealing and pulling food away from women and children, and they would run in the houses and get it. And if you ever found a door locked, they'd kick the door down because they knew that meant somebody had some food in there and they were trying to eat it. One occasion, they went in, and here's a woman that is eating, and give us the food in there. And what they would do sometimes is that if they're in process of eating, they'd grab your throat and choke you so you couldn't swallow it and make you regurgitate it up so they could pull it out and eat it. And so all of this is history that they had. And so they found this woman, and she said, I'm eating. And said, I've roasted my baby. You can have the other half. And she had eaten half of her little baby. Now, it was a horrible, horrible time that they had there. And so, but it just kept on and on and on in an unbelievable way. And finally, Titus gave the orders, okay, let's start knocking the wall down, and let's go in and get these guys. So they knocked holes in the wall. They went in. They started some fires. Nobody knows what happens. History says two things. The Romans said that the Jews set the temple on fire. The Jews say that the Roman soldiers threw a spear with fire on it. But anyway, it set the temple on fire, and the temple then was gutted on the inside with fire. Now, with all these big stones, that didn't hurt anything. But it was decorated with gold. So it melted all the gold. The gold all ran down in there. And so they conquered these Jews, got them out, and then they went back in and started scraping the gold off. They started scraping the gold, and then some of it was in the cracks, so they knocked the stones off to get the gold out of the cracks. They ended up not one stone upon another. Now, Jesus is telling them, has already told them that. So, that kind of is a brief history of some of the things that will happen here. So Matthew 24 now is telling us that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, and we see that it was destroyed in 70 A.D. So I want you to mark that date so that you'll never forget it, because that is a very significant date in the history of the Bible, from the Old Testament to the New, 70 A.D. And the reason that it was an important date is because of that scripture that just came up. Luke 21, Jesus said, as he's talking about this, he said, for these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. So, this is it. This is the end. Now, that is coming, that is in here. Now, by the way, Titus was the one that conquered them. So here it is. They built a big arch to Titus back in Rome. By the way, Vespasian died pretty quickly, and Titus went back, and he became the next emperor. And it makes him a great big arch, and it's still there. There they are in the museums and so forth, and it's still standing over in there. I think this is an interesting picture. Here it is that they have this mural that's up there. It's carved in stone, and do you see the candlestick that they're carrying back? Now, this is where they've imprinted that in there, because when the people came back, they would bring slaves. They would bring slaves by the tens of thousands or the hundreds of thousands in this case. So they would bring them back, and then they would bring all the riches. They'd bring it back, and they would present it to the emperor. Well, here it shows them bringing the candlestick, and you know where they got the candlestick. It's out of the temple there. Okay, now back to the question of the apostles. So here's what they said. They're going to ask him this question. So verse 3. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? All right, now here's Mount Olive. as you're looking down from Mount Olive, and that domed building down there is where the temple would have been sitting. Today, it's a mosque. It's a mosque that they have built, and it's a very beautiful structure, but it's a mosque. But think about that as being the temple that was there. They're setting up where the camera is, where this is taken. And as they were sitting there, they asked him 3 questions then. Now, as we look at these questions, it's kind of interesting. Because you look at Matthew, and I want you to notice in Matthew, tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the kind of the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world. Now, obviously, these things is talking about this, when one stone will not be left upon another. Over here, we find, when he's talking, it's a little different thing. Mark says, tell us when these things, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign when these things are all about to be accomplished. He doesn't mention the end of the world or anything. He wants to know, what's the sign that all these things will be accomplished? The same thing with Luke. When Luke records it, well, he puts it down the same way. Now, the only problem that we have, and this chapter would not be misunderstood, if it wasn't for the questions in Matthew. Now, they're legitimate questions, but Matthew, in his account, says, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Now, that sounds like the end of the physical world in there. So that's what causes the confusion, is because of those 2 questions right there. So now, let's try to break it down and start this way. First, we're going to see that they could not have been referring to the second coming of Christ at the end of the world. I'm going to show you that. They could not have been. Secondly, we will see the end of the world refers to the end of an age, that age, the Jewish age, and not to the physical world. And then thirdly, we will see that the Bible language Christ used that in Bible language, Christ did come in the destruction of Jerusalem. So we'll see all of these things put together. So first, let's do this. We're going to see that they could not have been referring to the second coming. You say, why? Because they hadn't been taught about the second coming at the end of the world at this time. They hadn't been taught about it. Stop to think. When did they ask this question? It was before Jesus died. Now, when they asked the question, they didn't believe in a second coming. They didn't even believe in the resurrection. They thought that Christ was going to set up his kingdom while he was here upon the earth. They weren't looking down there. They hadn't been taught that at this time. So let's kind of look at it in this way. Here we have Jesus over there dying on the cross. Now, what did the apostles think? What was their thinking before they asked this question? In Matthew 16, Jesus there told them that he was going to die and be raised up. And Peter took him again to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from thee, Lord, this shall never be unto thee. They didn't even believe Jesus was going to die. And then, again, in Mark, why it tells here that she came and asked if her sons could sit there on his right hand and his left hand, and said, Command that these 2 sons may sit, one on the right hand, one on the left, in thy kingdom. And Jesus answered and said, You know not what you ask. You don't know anything about the kingdom. See? You don't understand it yet. And then he took the 12 with him, as they were going up to Jerusalem, and he told them in 32 that he was going to be delivered to the Gentiles and mocked, and they shall scourge and kill him, and the 3rd day he shall rise again. And they understood none of these things. And this saying was hid from them, and they perceived not the things he said. I want you to understand, these apostles didn't know when the kingdom was coming. They didn't even believe in the resurrection at this period of time. See? At this period of time. It's there. And then, as they heard these things, he added and spake a parable, because he was nigh to Jerusalem, and because they supposed that the kingdom of God was immediately to appear. So they thought, we're probably going in to set up the kingdom that's there. Now that's a situation when they asked the question. That was their background. That was the history. That's how they were thinking when they asked the question about this, your coming and so forth. Now, after they asked the question, before the resurrection, here it is. Jesus is going to tell them in John that he's going to go away and he'll prepare a place for them. And Thomas said, Lord, we know not whither thou goest. How know we the way? They didn't even know where he was going, let alone that he's coming back. you see, at this time. See, these men were ignorant at this time, even of that resurrection, him going away. In John 16, a little while and you'll see me no more, and again a little while and you shall see me. Some of his disciples said one to another, What is this that he saith unto us, a little while, and ye behold me, and again a little while and you shall see me, because I go to the Father. And they said, What is this that he saith, a little while? We know not what he saith. So these people do not understand. They couldn't have asked the question that's in there. Now let's look. After the resurrection, it said, Then entered into the tomb the other disciple who came first to the tomb, and he saw and believed. For as yet they knew not the Scripture that he must rise from the dead. So they didn't understand it. Even after he rose from the dead, they didn't understand it. In Luke 24, again, they didn't understand it. And then in Acts 1, you remember right before Jesus ascended into heaven, just right before he went, they therefore, when they were come together, asked him, Lord, dost thou at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? Are you about to do it now, Lord? They didn't know anything about him going away and his second coming. They didn't know anything about the kingdom at this time. That's what he told them. It's not for you to know, but when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, you're going to know these things. Now, secondly, we'll see that the end of the world refers to the end of an age and not the end of the physical world. Now, the word translated, word, in verse 3 is ionos, meaning age or period of time. Now, there's no question about this. You can check it in any dictionary, any lexicon. Everybody in the whole world will tell you that. And the word for the physical world is cosmos. Now, they use the word ionos, age. What shall be the sign of the end of the age? They didn't ask him, what shall be the sign of the end of this physical world? Now let's look at how how the translators translated some of your new ones. Here, the New American Standard. Tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the sign of your coming, and the end of the age. And here it is in the New King James, and the end of the age. And here it is in the Revised Standard, the close of the age. And here it is in the NIV, at the end of the age. And on and on. There's just no question about it. The word that they ask, what shall be the sign here of thy coming, and the end of the, is not the physical world, but the end of the age that they ask him. So let's see what that means. The Jewish period of time, of course, started 1,600 years before Christ, and it went down to 70 A.D., and that was the end of the Jewish system, when the temple was destroyed. Now that's what they're asking. Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? See? What's it going to be? You and I know that it happened in 70 A.D. Well, the exact expression, the end of the age, is also used other places in the Bible. There it is, the end of the age. Now in your Greek language, it's in Hebrews 9:26, here's what it says. Else must he have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once at the end of the ages hath he been manifested, put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. So when did Jesus die? At the end of the ages. That's when he died. 1 Corinthians 10. Now these things happened, talking about the writings in the Old Testament, these things happened to them by way of example, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the end of the ages are come. Any question about who that's talking about? See? That's us. That's the New Testament Christians, Paul says. See? The end of the ages. So you say, why would they call it that? See, why would it be called that? Well, let's start out. One age was the Garden of Eden, wasn't it? From Eden to the flood would be another period of time. From the flood to Babel would be another period. From Abraham to Moses would be another period. From Moses to Christ would be another period. What you call Mosaical. And then Christ to the end, that's the last. That's the end. That's the end of the ages. Ain't no more. Nobody's going to be coming back and replacing the system of Jesus Christ. That's it. It's all over. Each one of these ages was replaced by another one, but this is it. Christ is the last. So it's the end of the ages. Peter said this in Acts 2 when they said, what's going on here? He said, and this is that which hath been spoken through the prophet Joel, and it shall be in the last days, saith God. Now, he said that on the day of Pentecost. What do you mean by the last days? We're in the last days. These are it. If it lasts 10,000 years, these are it. Nobody is coming after Christ. Christ is the last that is to come. Now, I want to give you something a little bit different that is in here. As we look at this, we're going to erase Christian right there. It's a Christian, but I'm going to build this chart here a little bit. Now, as we look at it, notice it's changing colors. There was a 37-year transition period between 33 AD and 70 AD, a transition period. You say, what do you mean by that? Here's what I mean. In 33 AD, Jesus Christ died on the cross. When he died on the cross, the old law was taken out of the way, Ephesians 2:14. But I want to ask you a question. It says that he died about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning on the day of Pentecost, AD 33. The Old Testament was taken out of the way. What happened to the God-fearing Jews in Rome? Some God-fearing old man or old lady couldn't make the trip, and they're in Rome. Did all of a sudden they've been serving God all faithfully all these years? Now then, Peter gets up and he preaches, if you want to be saved now, it's a different way. You're not going to be going through animal sacrifices. The Lord has died. So repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of your sins. Then they started assembling together. They began partaking of the Lord's Supper. What did that God-fearing Jew do over in Rome? Who'd never heard of that? Did the Lord that day say, okay, old man, you've served me for 80 years, but Jesus just died on the cross, and now then the old law's taken out of the way, and you haven't been obedient to the new, so bang, you're going to hell. You say, no, they had to be given a chance to hear. Had to be given a chance. That's what I'm talking about. There was a 37-year period of time. These apostles went out, and whom did they preach? They preached to the Jews. They preached to the Gentiles. And what was their message? Christ has come. He's died on the cross. Now then, you need to be obedient to Him. Moses said when he comes, you listen to him. But that all ended in 70 AD. That's when the Jewish system came to an end. All the records were destroyed. There's not a Jew living today that has any idea what tribe they're from. Now, you might meet one. He might say, oh, I'm from the tribe of something. Not a Jew in the world that knows what tribe he is from. The only way they could know was through the records in Jerusalem. And every record has been destroyed. So they can't revive it. They can't rebuild it. They can't rebuild it. Even if they went in and conquered the Palestinians and ran them off and built a new temple and said, now, let's start worshiping. They've got an awful problem, and they're wrestling with it. Who will be the priest? They have to come from Levi. Who's a Levite? Nobody knows. Somebody says, well, my mom said that her dad was, and so, okay, your mom said her dad was. Got any proof? Anybody know that you're a Levite? Anybody know anything? No, we don't know. So what are we going to do? And they're wrestling with that problem. They're wrestling with the problem of several things that when you get there. But at 70 AD, that whole system went dead. Now, the Jewish period of time, how could his coming be referring to the destruction of Jerusalem? Because it says he's coming in there. Let me show you, according to Bible language, and that's what these people knew. They knew Bible language. They knew Old Testament language. This is the way the Old Testament talked. This is the way the Old Testament talked. If today I said something about, let's have coffee tomorrow and we'll chew the fat. Well, people in other nations, they might not know what it was. 1,000 years from now, somebody read that and they'd say, I wonder what in the world Lowell meant. You and I know what it means because that's the way we talk. We know what it means. Now, how did they talk? How did the Bible talk? I want you to notice here. When Egypt was destroyed, God said, Behold, Jehovah rideth upon a cloud and cometh into Egypt. Look at that. Jehovah rode on a cloud and came into Egypt. Behold, the Lord Jehovah will come as a mighty one. He came to Egypt. Isaiah talking about the destruction of Israel. Jehovah will come with fire, and his chariot shall be like the whirlwind. So Jehovah's coming in a chariot, and he's going to bring fire with him. All of this is figurative language. Jehovah didn't come in a chariot. Jehovah didn't come on a cloud. It's language, it's figurative language showing. God is telling Egypt, and God is telling them, I'm coming to destroy the nation, and you can't stop me. I'll not be coming riding on a horse. I'll be coming like riding on a cloud. How do you go out and stop a cloud? He's unstoppable. That's the idea. It just goes on and on. About Judah, and Jehovah my God shall come. So Jehovah is coming to destroy them. About Jesus, the prophecy is, the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple. So he's coming. And in Malachi, and I will come near to you in judgment. Wow. Now then, this is beginning to talk about 70 A.D. So what's happening to the Lord who's coming to his temple, and he's coming in judgment? The Jews knew this. I'll come to you. They didn't anticipate all of a sudden God or Jesus showing up and saying, okay, I'm here with the rifles and we will do this or that. This is Bible language, and what that Bible language means is the nation will be destroyed. And I, God, will be the one that does it. We all know about studying Habakkuk, how that there God says, I do a work in your day that if I told you, you wouldn't believe it. He said, I raise up the Chaldeans. I'm raising them up. They're coming. There's no way you can stop them. They're going to trot over you. And so this is Bible language. So when it talks about Jesus coming, it's not talking about second coming. It's talking about he's coming to destroy them. So there's the way it's worded. For as the lightning cometh from the east and seen even unto the west, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. And when we get there, you'll be able to see it's talking about him coming in Jerusalem. Now besides all that, we know that these things that we're talking about had to happen in that generation because Jesus said so. In verse 34, he said, I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all these things be accomplished. Question is settled. If I were to say, I don't have any idea what these clouds mean. I don't have any idea what this means. There's one thing I do know. Jesus said it's going to happen in this generation. Then you start having all of these signs. In verses 4 through 33, we'll be studying verse by verse this next week. Then he comes down, and right before he says it'll be in this generation, Jesus said, now I want you to use these signs. Now from the fig tree, learn her parable. When her branches now become tender and putteth forth its leaves, you know that the summer is nigh. That's where we are right now, isn't it? Everybody looks out, you see the signs. Summer is close by. Even so ye also, when you see all these things, know ye that he is nigh, even at the door. When you see all of what things? All these things we've been talking about. Okay? All these things. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all these things be accomplished. Now there's where we'll have to conclude tonight in here. And we'll pick it up then, our study, as you can see, start out with verse 4, where Jesus said, not one stone will be left upon another. And he said, now these are the signs. So we'll look at them, about warring nations and all of these things, and we'll see that they all happened right down at that time. Okay, class dismissed.